Hello everyone. What we have in front of our eyes is probably the best cocoa beans slash brown dye farm that has ever been made so far. And in this video you will learn all about how it works, from operating it to the core mechanics. Some of you might recognize it as a bulkier version of my prototype, which I mentioned in a previous video, but trust me, you will be thankful for all that extra bulk with the functionalities it comes with. This farm is fully automatic, from the planting cocoa beans to the crafting into brown dye. The only thing you need to do is press right click to plant the cocoa beans and reload once you're out. Other than that, everything is done on its own.
Alright, so let's see how this farm operates. So first of all, let's come down here and make sure our brown dye chest is empty. And now you'll notice I have no cocoa beans in my inventory, and that's because we need to get them from this buffer over here. And so we can grab as much as we want, but for this example, let's grab 32 and send the buffer back on its way. And then if we climb up here and start planting, you will notice that the cocoa beans get instantly broken after they are fully grown. And then they get picked up by this stream of hopper minecarts. But then I don't have any more cocoa beans, so what do? Well, I can call this buffer once again and grab whatever has been used, and you can see that everything that I used has been refilled, and the excess cocoa beans have been continuing their way down this water stream into our crafting system and got turned into brown dye. And just to show you how quick this brown dye actually gets produced, let's grab 32 cocoa beans and produce some more. This time I'm gonna run directly to the brown dye chest so we can see the actual speed of its production. So let's come over here and open it, and as you can see, this brown dye is actually getting crafted at 2 times hopper speed. I also optimized this farm as much as possible by limiting dust usage, and so if you're having trouble with performance, this farm should not be an issue. But even though you're already sold by these amazing capabilities, let's see how the mechanics work. So everything starts with this small production unit. So if I turn off this lever, you can see that it turns off this redstone line, which depowers these dispensers. Now, this observer detects it and sends another redstone output, which updates it and turns it on. And then this observer detects it, it turns off, it turns on again, and the cycle repeats. And while all this is happening, this piston is also sharing this redstone line, so it is constantly extending and breaking our cocoa beans, but it breaks them actually after these dispensers have bone milled it, so it breaks only when it's fully grown. Now when we come at the back, we can see that also when we turn off the lever, it starts a comparator clock, which also powers this repeater and sends a redstone output into this block, which also powers this QC dispenser. And since this regular redstone dust does not send an update to our dispenser, we need to add a block that also gets powered and sends an update to a dispenser, so a node block. So activating this dispenser lets us have a constant stream of hopper minecarts. If you're wondering how they are still always picking up the cocoa beans after they get destroyed, it's because there is a second hopper minecart inside this block, which is hovering over the rails. And if you're wondering how that is possible, it's a new mechanic that I discovered, and I actually made a video on it, so you can look for it in the description. So let's continue. So as I said, these cocoa beans get distributed into these hopper minecarts, and then they get distributed into a minecart eater, which the minecart gets picked up in this hopper and put into this dropper, which drops it into this water stream and puts it back into our dispenser over here. And the actual payload is separated into this water stream. And if we go around the back over here, you can see that there is our buffer. So every single cocoa bean that passes through here is going to go inside our buffer first, and only after the buffer is full, then it's going to continue its way into the auto crafting station. And so the way I set up this buffer is actually very simple. We have a node block over here that gets detected by our observer and sends a redstone signal into this red wall. Then the signal gets extended by a 4-tick repeater, and it sends the signal to these target blocks, which power our rails. So if I click it, it powers the rails on both sides at a time, and it powers it just enough time for the minecart to depart and go on to its next station. And then we have our last part, which is our double hopper speed crafter, which I replicated over here. And basically how double hopper speed works is that this hopper is pointed into this one, but there's actually a hopper underneath. So it transfers one item into this hopper and gets one item pulled. So there's two items at a time. So if I come over here and put two items at a time, you can see that they instantly get distributed between those two and get added into this crafter. However, for this, you absolutely need this hopper to pick up the items as more than one. Because if we put all the items in another hopper behind, it is actually setting up the pace for all these hoppers, so we're actually only getting one item every hopper tick. And this feature is perfect for us because remember, our cart heater over there breaks with about half a stack of cocoa beans inside, so we always get more than one cocoa bean at a time. And so then we have our hopper pointing into this one, which links up to this side of the crafter. And then we have a second hopper under it pulling items, also connecting to the crafter, so we get two items at the same time. And double hopper speed is great and all, but it doesn't mean anything if you can't craft at double hopper speed. This is why we have an observer clock based circuit. And so we have a comparator set on subtracting mode, which is always at least sending a signal of 8. Because we have 8 locked slots. And so to make sure it only crafts when there's an item inside, we have another comparator sending a signal of 8 because of this compositor on the side. And so 8 minus 8 is 0, so the signal does not get through. But as soon as one or more items goes through, then the signal turns into 9 or more. And so it powers this piston, which starts the observer clock, powers this red wool, which crafts our items and get distributed into this chest. And note that because this is set up a certain way, if we drop our cocoa beans and the chest is actually full, well, it does not clog, it instead just drops everything next to it. And so make sure if you're going to make an astronomical amount of brown dye that you have extra buffers under the chest. And compared to my prototype over there, the hoppers are actually exposed if you were to take out the barrels, so you can link up your bone meal farm directly into them and have a constant flow of bone meal that way. It's honestly quite compact and optimized. Alright, perfect. Now that we know the mechanics, we can modify this for our personal use. So let's see a couple of modifications we can do. So first of all, you can obviously break this chest and add some ice to make a water stream to your collection system. But that's not the preferred modification I have, and let me show you what it is. So we can break this crafter and place it upwards instead. And so that way we can bring our items up here, but you can see that there's still a gap missing. And to fix that gap, we can take a dropper and place one here, because if you didn't know, droppers actually conduct redstone, and so bringing the signal into this dropper not only powers this crafter, but it also powers the block above. So another dropper, and we can just add our chest over here like this. And if we add some cocoa beans into this crafter, let's actually lock these slots. They are getting distributed to this dropper, and you'll see that also there's none left, and that's because the observer sends a signal which sends them upwards, and once the piston retracts, it also sends a signal because it detects that the block is changing state since it's going down, and so it also clears these two and it goes into the chest. And so that way I think it looks much cleaner. You can even add a item frame with cocoa beans, and you're gonna add a trapdoor down here just to make it look slightly prettier in my opinion. But the reason why I didn't explain this design first is because it has a slight flaw, which is negligible. It's that this hopper is the only one that can be placed under it. So if you make a buffer, since it is crafting at double hopper speed and loading this chest at single hopper speed? Well, technically this chest is bound to be full. It has 54 slots and it gets taken one item at a time, but it receives two. So 54 slots plus 27, that would be 81. So you have a limit of 81 stacks back to back until this chest clogs and everything flies everywhere. But honestly, I think most people wouldn't really care about that because you won't be placing cocoa beans all day and making brown dye stacks. But it's still something to keep in mind if you're going to use this variation. And so with all of these features into this single farm, we have, from my opinion, the best cocoa bean / brown dye farm in the game. And with that, we can check off brown dye on our to-do list and be one step closer to finalizing our universal dye farm. If you like my redstone builds and videos, consider subscribing, as I have a lot of big projects in the making which you won't want to miss out on.